honored to be here today with the three distinguished experts that I talked about earlier to discuss our topic, which is beyond policies, embedding occupational safety and health into supply chain operations. That is, focus on moving from policies to processes and operations, right? So the three gentlemen with us today, the first one is Professor Ankur Sarin. He's an associate professor in the Public Systems Group at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. His research spans public systems, education reform, social and economic inequality, the role of technology in marginalized communities, and policy implementation. Ankur, we have been very proud to have you as a senior advisor to Safer India since almost our beginning. Um, Mr. Shankar Venkateswaran is co-founder and managing partner, Sustainability Integration at eCube Investment Advisors. He was Tata Group's first head of sustainability and previously has held leadership roles at Sustainability and PwC and served as founding executive director of Partners in Change. He's a key architect of Indian NGRBC, that is National Guidelines for Responsible Business Conduct, and a member of the committee that drafted the BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report. And that is where we have had the pleasure of working with Shankar. He also serves on the National Human Rights Commission Core Group on Business and Human Rights. Thank you, Shankar, for joining us today. Our third distinguished panelist is Mr. Vinod Kumar Sant. He was the former Director General of the National Safety Council of India. He served for over 2 decades in DG Fastly, which is the Central Labour Ministry's arm for factory advisory on safety, and has chaired OSH committees for ISO and BIS. He also brings automotive sector experience, having worked at Escorts and Hero Honda Motors. It's great to have you with us, Vinod, as an industry, a government policy, and a worker safety expert. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I know we are all keen to talk to you, and there will be questions following my questions. I'll start with a few, and I'll request the audience to please add their questions on the chat, and I'll pick them up. So, Shankar, can I start with you first, please? Right? You heard the findings of our Safety Niti 2025. Now, as an architect of SEBI's BRSR, which we have analyzed for the top 10 brands, you saw that many brands have improved their policy reporting, but not so much implementation, especially in the supply chain, right? What are your reflections on what they have reported well and the missing parts of the reports in the supply chain? And what do you think is therefore the problem and indeed the opportunity that exists?
Thank you, Sandeep, and many congratulations to SII for a really very comprehensive report. In fact, the report pretty much answers the question, Sandeep, because I think the way it's been illustrated is very eye-opening. So if when the graphic was shown by Siddharth and Dhanraj, and you look at the left with all the reds and the right with, let's say, less reds, I mean, not as many greens as we would like, that does definitely shows a shift. The shift is slow, for sure, because you would have, in 5 years, one would have liked to see more greens than the ambers. But the shift is, so the shift is slow. And I think one of the things that the report very clearly suggested is that the struggle that OEMs seem to have is when just going beyond the tier one supplier. Forget 3, 4, even the struggle is even with tier two suppliers. And I think that's really where which has to be the next step. So one is, yes, the policy bits have improved. There are far less reds, both in terms of policy within the company and as far as policies relating to the supply chain is concerned, the supplier code of conduct and what is contained in that. I think those are all good. But as you said, the meat is in the action. So how are they sort of looking at things changing on the ground when it comes to there? And I think there are a bit of gaps, and one would like to see how those gaps get filled. So tier two is clearly a gap, and I can understand it being a struggle in the sense that you do have a line of sight of your tier one supplier for sure. You have a strong direct contractual relationship with the tier one supplier. So that gives the OEMs a little bit more muscle to persuade, to cajole, and so on and so forth. And obviously, that starts becoming less and less as we go down. But I think what OEMs need to recognize is that it is in their interest to start going beyond tier one. And I think it's about trying to build that case, just like you built the case for saying why you need to look at safety as an issue, not beyond just the moral obligation, but just it makes business sense to do that. I think the business case for looking deeper into the supply chain needs to be built, and we need to start, getting more and more evidence to demonstrate that it is in your interest to do that. I think that is the move. I think the move is happening, but it's just far, far too slow. So whether it is on appointment letters, on registration, ESIC registrations, monitoring of accidents, all this, which is sort of still a lot of reds that are appearing in the thing. I think what your study very helpfully points out, where the attention should be paid by the OEMs. The reds need to definitely become ambers. The ambers definitely need to become green. And just the fact that you've broken this up so well is, I think, very helpful because it provides them of, you're not talking in abstraction. You can then speak to companies in specific, saying that this is where you need to work. These are the gaps. This is what you need to do. And I think that's the movement that has to happen and has to happen very quickly. So I think those are the gaps. And I think it's important for organizations like SII and organizations around the OEMs to find ways by which they can leverage, they can push and cajole these changes to happen. Because ultimately, I think that, while you can speak about regulations and everything else, those are still distanced. The direct impact is usually through the principle, through OEM pushing the tier one, and making it a condition, so to speak, that unless you look at your own supplier, which is the tier two supplier, this won't happen, and so on. I think that's where the gaps are, and that's, I think, perhaps a way forward, which even your recommendations are suggesting. So I'll stop there. Happy to talk more about this later.
Thank you, Shankar. I'll come back to you. And I do agree the stress on tier twos is critical, and we are saying let's start with that. Just as a data point, of the accidents that we have seen, 10,000 odd, 25 odd percent have happened in tier ones, which in ACMA members, which are mostly tier ones, some tier twos. And then tier twos are the biggest in terms of those accidents, right? So you're right. They must start with that. And I'm glad you talked about business sense that it makes. In fact, we have Mr. Ved Pathak of ACMA amongst our audience today. Later on, if you are around, Mr. Ved Pathak, I'll come back to you and actually talk about the business sense that it makes, because that's what you do every day. So I'll come back to Shankar's point with you later. But can I go right now to Vinod, you? Now, you have auto sector roots, you have done senior roles in DG Fastly, NSC. You have had this ringside view of, the auto sector and wider manufacturing, right? What do you think is the importance of worker safety and working conditions in improving Indian manufacturing practices? And in that context, why do you think that the automotive brands are, despite that, not prioritizing implementing, good worker safety in their suppliers? While if they had a problem like product quality or delivery or cost, they would, come like a ton of bricks on their suppliers, but not for worker safety and working conditions. Are they missing a trick, or are we missing a trick? What do you think?
Uh, Thank you for inviting me for this very important event. And I congratulate Safe in India for preparing and publishing the very nice reports. I have gone through that, and it brings out very important elements of preventing of accidents and what everybody. In fact, I would say that safety is not only one person's job; it is everybody's responsibility, and that has been the case whether it is a company or whether it is a supply chain. Everybody has to be involved into it. That is one thing. Second is what you have pointed out, because the it is a mammoth task. So you have taken only auto sector because of importance in the economy, its contribution to GDP, its contribution to manufacturing sector. That's good. But the when I mean, my own experience for about 30 years in safety, it is everywhere. It is everywhere. It is not specific to automobile sector only. You take the power sector, whether you take a construction sector, whether you take a port sector, everywhere this kind of thing is happening. So accidents are happening, and the contract labors are totally I mean totally, I'll not say totally, but then they are ignored as far as their safety and working conditions are concerned. So it is not unique to auto sector. Only thing, as you said, the automotive sector is more prominent than other sectors because they are directly in contact with the consumers. So they need to be more aware about what they are doing and how they are doing. So probably that would be very important to put across the automotive sector, that you are watched by the people. There are other companies probably are less watched. Okay, that is one thing. Second is, as I said earlier when we talked about this, that I am also vice chairman of Industrial Safety Task Force of Confederation of Indian Industry. And in the first 2 years, it was set up in 2014 or 15. And the first year, the task which I had taken up myself is basically publish a report on business case for safety. And this report was published. It is there. I don't know whether it is on website or not, but it is available. And there we had taken a very good, I mean, I would not say very good, but example of Maruti and its supplier. How one explosion or fire and explosion in its supply chain. That is, I think it was a air conditioning manufacturing unit. I don't remember the name of the company, but it was supplying air conditioner to Maruti and other brands also. But Maruti was a major consumer for that. And how, because of that fire, a big fire, the Maruti supply chain was affected. So this we have highlighted in that report. So such kind of case studies we should publish. I mean, that would help us highlight the importance of supply chain management safely. That is one thing. So I don't, I mean, I would say importance of OSH and WC is everywhere. It is important. It is not only automotive safety. Now the coming to the point why they are not prioritizing sufficiently, it is obviously the cost component. It is a cost component. Um, and I'm not saying that all of them are like that, but then most of the industries, they are very cost conscious. As you would understand, in India, our consumers are very cost conscious. भाई 2-5 रुपए की फर्क से हम आगे बढ़ते हैं फॉर डिसीजन मेकिंग सो वी आर वेरी कॉस्ट कॉन्शियस सोसाइटी so obviously that is in our DNA, so probably that has to be changed. And then but I would say that in one particular sector where this change has taken place, particularly OSH and WC, that is working condition, is chemical sector. When I joined DG firstly in 1989, post of Bhopal disaster, and now you see what is chemical sector is doing. There are much improvements have taken place in, including in the medium scale enterprises also. So that is the reason that cost is a very important factor. That is one thing. So this is what I would like to say. If any other question will be there, then I will add from my side. Yes.
No, thank you, Vinodji. I think your experience is practical, and therefore, frankly, I find it heartening to hear that I didn't know this, that chemical sector has improved so much even in the medium-sized industry because of regulations and the implementation. So it can be done. And our argument to auto sector has been not only are you prominent in terms of potential ethical consumerism, right? But also because they can influence rest of the country, they can contribute to rest of the country given their size. And if the biggest businesses in the country don't take the responsibility, who will? And they have the profits.
Yeah, that's true.
It's
That's
not
true. They are in profits. Yes.
these are some of the largest and most powerful companies in the country, right?
That's right.
I talked about Maruti, and Maruti actually engaged with us extremely well in the first 3-4 years. Um, and they made a number of improvements, and on the ground they have done quite a bit of action. And we are hoping they come back and do more of what they started with, which has honestly gone back a little bit. So here is my call to Maruti, if we can step up the game. And cost, of course, it's true, but chasing cost all the time, we know doesn't lead to the right answers all the time, right? As a country. I'll come to Ankur. In fact, it's a perfect, segue into what you helped us do. You were one of our key advisors on our recommendations to Government of India on proving that the strong correlation between occupational safety and health, working conditions, and Indian labor productivity and manufacturing productivity. Could you please talk about that opportunity in India and indeed, in the auto sector, if you could, and that in the context of today's finding, why do you think the sector needs to focus on its supply chain?
Thanks, Sandeep. And thank you to Safe in India for this incredible work. I think what you all have been really successful in doing is making an invisible problem, because it was distributed, it was diffused. You've made it visible to all of us by showing that this is not sort of these one-off issues. This is a systemic issue that we are facing. And more recently, the work that has been done, that your team put together in trying to understand the economics of this, and especially when we go beyond sort of the economics of one firm and we look at it at a macroeconomic perspective. And I think from that perspective, it is clear that this is not a sort of a trade-off that we face, that either we do safety or we can be concerned about the economy. These are things that go together. And no matter what evidence you look at the macro level, there is a strong positive correlation between safety and either the productivity or GDP, whichever metric you want to take. Now, why is this association? Right now, you could say, is it causal? Does safety lead necessarily to improvement in productivity? Or maybe there's another factor that affects both. And we will never really be able to disentangle these two. But the point here is that even if it is something else, what it is telling us is that, look, the same things that would help you improve safety would also likely increase productivity, also likely increase growth, right? So whether it be some of the things that we've heard today, maintenance of parts, right? A greater degree of professionalization, right? More managerial, better managerial skills, training. These are all things that would both improve safety and improve productivity. So I think the economic argument, at least at the macro level, is very clear. I don't think there is much to dispute or debate about that. Now the question comes, okay, how do we look at it at the micro level and the macro level, right? And I think there, it's not so much, again, I don't believe it's an economic problem. It's a coordination problem. We cannot make it, if we sort of try to get after one OEM or one particular firm to sort of get their safety right, to invest in safety, etc., maybe they will suffer a cost disadvantage. But if all of them are required to do this, then there's nobody who's necessarily gaining as far as costs go, or nobody who's losing. Now, so how does this coordination occur? Coordination can occur either in a voluntary way, wherein you have these associations and the associations say, hey, we will step forward and we will coordinate among ourselves. Or you have to have regulations, or the government has to step in. I think coordination can be feasible when you have a smaller number of players. So you do have the OEMs, and the OEMs can potentially coordinate among themselves, but the impact of that will be limited to their own firms, and at best, as we are seeing in your data, to tier one. When you have a large number of entities, as we do have in the auto industry or any other industry that you take, and many of them are sort of serving multiple OEMs, then you have a collective action problem which cannot be dealt with voluntarily. You would need the government to step in and solve this coordination problem, as has been done in any other country that you would want to look at. Right? So I think, in my mind, now we need to really be looking at this as sort of a larger coordination, collective action problem that needs to be solved. And I'll just end with sort of drawing a little bit from my background in education. India was one of the last countries to give its children a right to education, to make education compulsory, to make schooling compulsory, right? For a long time, it was argued that this is because we as a country are poor, we don't have resources. How do we do this? But in fact, if you look at the data, there were many countries that were poorer than us who were actually able to get to universal education much before us. And the implications of that in the rest of the economy are very obvious. We have a problem in terms of skilled labor, we have a problem in terms of human capital today, and that's because we haven't invested in education, we didn't prioritize education. The parallels here, I think, are very strong. We cannot say we are a poor country with sort of low, for competitive reasons, we need to be compromising on safety, because that is not a path to a more prosperous future. So I think we perhaps need to shift this debate to recognizing that, yes, it could be seen as a financial issue when we look at the very micro level, but at a macro level, there is no trade-off that we face. There is a need to step in, and the government would need to step in and move us sort of into greater oversight, right? I mean, I'll just end with a very simple thing. Yesterday I got a message saying that my PUC on my car has expired. Now we have 360 odd registered vehicles, which the government is tracking perhaps in terms of PUC, like pollution under control, right? I was trying to do a quick back of the envelope calculation, because I was, this estimate that Safe in India brought in about saying OSH, occupational safety and health, is costing us, or the absence of good policy there, and the resulting accidents, injuries, absences are costing nearly 4% of India's GDP, right? And that's nearly 12 lakh crores. Now, so even if you go to divert a fraction of that money into sort of saying, what can we do to prevent it, right? And we know 90% of injuries, again, Safe in India data says this, occur in power presses. I was trying to get an estimate of how many power presses are there. There is no estimate. Why is there no monitoring of a clearly, a piece of machinery that creates this much damage, that creates this much hurt? Isn't there a way for us to sort of, if at the least, anytime you buy a power press machine, right, there's a reporting feature which says, look, I have maintained it, I have done A, B, C, D, whether we start with sort of a self-certification, but at least we need to have a count of that. And at this point, we don't even have a count of that, right? So I think definitely there are some very low-hanging fruit also, which again, your work has always brought out. But I think the economic case for us moving towards a safer workplace, I think that argument is fairly sound, credible, and I don't think we should be discussing or debating that anymore. So I'll end it.
Thank you so much, Ankur. I think you ended with power press, which is actually quite topical for us, because few years
Typical.
I've been saying that could the brands just focus on their power press suppliers in tier 1 to 3, and they will then not be tens of thousands of factories, right? In Gurgaon, there may be hundreds, not thousands, and so on and so forth, right? And Maruti did do some of that in their tier 2 suppliers. And we know that for 4 quarters in a row in 22 and 23, accidents came down in Haryana after we started this work, right? So it can be done. And you're right, right? So this strong point of no trade-off, power presses, and this vicious cycle of we don't invest and therefore we get worse. And so how are we ever going to break out of this cycle, right? So thank you, Ankur. Ankur, I'll come back to you. Shankar, I want to come back to you with one more question before we go to the audience with a couple more questions to Ankur and Vinodji also. So you have seen the supply chain reporting. You have been architect of this reporting structure. You have seen some evidence now of the real on-the-ground action that we are talking about. You know what gets measured gets done. I'm sure you're a believer in that, right? Do you see deepening with time over years? How do you see deepening? And what do you think is the role of other stakeholders? Ankur talked about the government, industry bodies, investors and auditors, ESG auditors. And we have written to ESG auditors of all top 10 brands, and we are asking them, well, we have been publishing this report, Crush 19 from 2019, right? And how come your reporting doesn't even mention it, right? We have just started writing to Indian investors. We haven't gone overseas yet, right? What's your take on this?
Yeah. Thanks for that. But just if I can just step back a bit into a couple of things that Vinod and Ankur were saying. I think, I agree with Vinod's point that it's the safety issue. It is not just in the automotive. It's a cultural thing, right? I mean, you see the way we drive, see the way we cross the road. It's just not in our culture. And I think that's it's almost as if we have a large population, so people are expendable. So, there's a cultural issue. And I know that I can speak for the Tata Group that that's one thing that the group has been trying to spend a lot of in making a lot of investments in. So for example, you go to Tata Steel, everywhere there's a staircase, they'll say, please use handrail. And I use a handrail wherever I go. Uh, it just becomes part of who you are. I remember the managing director of Tata Power, when the new plant was being built, he was making a visit to the plant, and he said, I'm going in the morning. You and I, we have a meeting in the afternoon. I said, what are you going to do in the morning? He said, I'm just doing a safety walk. So the managing director was actually doing a safety walk around a power plant that was being built. So culture is important. So we don't have it at a national level, but certainly companies need to build that in. And when you build that in, then you don't have to tell them, look for tier one, tier two. It becomes your DNA, but easier said than done. So I just wanted to talk about that a bit. And as for on the cost business case piece that I spoke about earlier, no, I agree with Ankur that at a macro level you can make all those calculations, but as Vinod said, it's at the micro company firm level that you got to do the cost benefit, and I think that is where probably a piece of work that SI can think of doing is actually doing a micro study and saying, okay, my productivity increases. What is what is the value of that increased productivity? Uh, and therefore, and so there's a benefit. And what is the cost, the training, and so on and so forth. And the benefit is also lesser downtimes, lesser uh, disruptions, and so on. So I think but this is something we can discuss, I think, offline. But I'm just saying there are those things that need to happen at a micro level. But I can tell you this: when a company is coming and saying, "Prove to me that it makes sense to make this investment," then they're not serious. And I think that you have a problem because you don't need to prove this. It is self-evident. But there are companies who are going to ask you that question, so you might as well have it. But to come back to your question, uh, when we were looking at the BRSR, the logic of it was very simple. It was about saying, let's put more and more get companies to put more and more stuff out in the public domain. Now, moment they have to put things out in the public domain, data, and that is therefore open to scrutiny, they will measure it more carefully. They will, if they're not measuring it already because the format requires it, they will start measuring it and they will put it out there. And that itself is a big step. Just that they are then at least tracking it, which things they may not have tracked, they're now tracking. So that was the sort of philosophical sort of underpinning of the BRSR. But also a requirement that for the BRSR to work is that the stakeholders need to read the report, they need to analyze it, they need to use it. So putting a report out is just one part, but if the users don't use it and use it in ways that they can influence, what's the point of that? So an investor who is the most influential in this whole system is the investor looking at a BRSR report, looking at data like safety? Is their investor then raising those questions because his investment is at risk if it is with a company that doesn't care about safety, not only in its own four walls, but in the supply chain? So is the investor looking at it? Uh, if the investor is not looking at it, or if it's too, they don't have the time, that's where SII needs to come in and say, okay, we will do all the data massaging for you, we'll do all the calculations for you and present it. So I think uh, there is a huge responsibility of stakeholders outside to look at BRSR reports, to analyze them, and present them back not only to the company but also to the influencers, whether they are industry investors. In the case of automobiles, there are no B2B customers. There are only B2C customers, you and I, and we can't influence a company very much as a customer. But in the chemical industry that Vinod was talking about, which is largely a B2B business, a customer there can very strongly influence its supplier, the product that it makes. So, for example, Unilever, when it started to look at these kinds of sustainability in the larger sense in its supply chain, Tata Chemicals found itself at a very advantageous position because it was already committed to doing it. So it became a preferred supplier. So you can influence that, you know. So I think stakeholders have a huge role to play, but somebody like SII, civil society organizations, need to bring that data, need to analyze it and push it to that investor, to push it to different stakeholders who can influence behavior change in the company. And I think that's an important thing. On the industry bodies, which is another stakeholder, I think Ankur said it well. How can we they look at collectively creating awareness about this where there are common suppliers for multiple companies? Can those companies get together and say, yeah, let's ask our suppliers to follow some very basic, norms of safety and so on and so forth? So I think, so each category of stakeholder has a different role to play, and the BRSR data provides them with that necessary analysis, and your report provides them with that necessary analysis to know which are the levers to look at, which are the buttons to press, so that these changes happen. So I'll stop there and back to you.
No, thank you. Thank you, Shankar. And you're right, we have also heard a lot of good practices of Tata Group. We are hoping that Tata Motors plays a more proactive role in our discussions than it has until now. We were almost hoping that Tata Group will take a lead in this. So, we are still having those discussions. You talked about business case. Sakshi, if you don't mind, after I finish this round, if Mr. Ved Pathak of ACMA is there, can you put him on screen? I want to ask him the question of what he justifies to tier ones and tier twos every day, that all these improvements lead to improving safety and labor productivity and business benefits. That's what he does every day. So let's talk about, if he's available, it would be good to hear him. And I also want to get Vineet Kaulji, if he's on the call, Sakshi, if you can get him next, because he's talking about cost versus people, and he's a senior HR professional in the country. So I'll get them in after you. But Vinodji, right now, can I come back to you? Can you just talk about what Shankar is talking about, right? In terms of what's possible here, in terms of this cost debate, in terms of firm level business case, right? In terms of what incentives can brands really either provide suppliers or should have to make a real change in the S of ESG, because everybody's so focused on E that the focus on S has gone down a bit or is not there, right? So what do you think, Vinodji?
I wonder if we lost him.
We have lost him.
Yeah.
Actually, we have lost Vinodji.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you're back. Yes.
Okay. Sir, can you repeat your question, because there was a
That's fine. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
No, I was saying that Shankar was talking about the business case that is required at a unit level for businesses to be convinced that safety is good, right? And you've worked in safety and DG Fast. Are you still there? You're still there, right?
Yeah.
You worked at unit level, you worked at country level, of course, industry level. So I wanted you to react to what you think is, how is safety profitable or not at a unit level, right? And also, what incentive do you think brands need to prioritize this safety in their suppliers, in their supply chain, so they feel the business benefit of it? Because clearly, if they are wise, it's in their own interest to do it, as all of you are saying earlier, right? And
Right.
frankly, Shankar, to your point, we have been asking the brands because we have limited resources and factories don't let us in. And we have gone into a factory to start that process with Dunu Roy, who's quite a big name in this space, and he's a nation builder. But when it came to the moment of sharing information on proving productivity gains, which needed absence information, sickness information, all that, they didn't want to share that.
Yeah.
So we are requesting the brands, you understand this, you have in your minds, this already. Why don't you create the business case for your suppliers, for your own good. So we'll continue and we'll take your suggestion and try pushing it harder. But I'll come back to Vinod. And Vinod, if you don't mind, what do you think about it?
Yeah, actually, uh, particularly in our country, I think safety is not given importance as a business case. There are two things. One is when any particular accident happens, the cost of accident is not calculated. Of course, you don't have any data because that kind of data is not generated at the unit level. But if you consider the indirect cost of accident versus a direct cost of accident, the direct cost is only seen, which is very, say, hardly 10% or maybe 15%. But indirect cost is very huge, which is not seen. That is the one reason. Second is, in our country, the consequence
Oh, we have a technical problem with his Wi-Fi. Let's give him a minute. While we are getting him back to the audience, if you have any questions, please do post them. We'll take them. We also have Rahul available, our worker colleague who was there earlier. If there are any questions for him, please post them and I'll happily get him in. Okay, let's use this time to come back to Ankur. Ankur, I'll ask you last question before we go to. Rahul, Vinodji, you're back. Sorry, please carry on.
Yeah, can I continue?
Yes, please.
I'll take 2 3 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
What I was talking about is the consequence of this not complying or not following safety. In our country, the consequences are very, very less. Whereas if you go to advanced countries or developed countries, the consequences are very, very huge. You can imagine when under the Factories Act, because I was working on the Factories Act, the non-compliance, the penalty is very, very less earlier times, and it was continuing since 1948. And ultimately, I think 2025 only they have now changed in OSH code. You can imagine, right? Second thing is regarding our judiciary also. I mean, it is a complete society. I'll not blame any particular aspect, or I will not point out to any one particular player. But that is the case. I mean, nobody wants to go to court and file the case. Even inspectors are not wanting to file the case for the violations, even if they know the violation. Okay, so it is a combination of all factors which prevents or which deters the OSH getting the prominence in the supply in the overall manufacturing area. I am today not only when you manufacturing but in all you go to construction site. What is happening now? Things are much better than earlier. Of course, 20 years it has definitely improved because of I would say because of the financial institutions which they are. I would add to what Mr. Shankar was saying regarding Tata. Yes, I had a very good uh, experience with Tata because when in 2023 at CII level, we conducted one best competition, best practices competition amongst industry, and we invited entries. And Tata Power was one of that who has got the award because for the contractor management. And we see their system, and we also went to their plant and found out how they are doing. But then it was not a supply chain; it was a contractor labor management. Okay, but that is different than supply, but that shows their sincerity at least compared to all others, right? So it is basically another important thing which I would like to say here is that because I worked in safety for so many years, even if the top management is convinced about safety, there are organizations, I don't want to name them here, but there are organizations, their top management, say managing director or the MD, they are interested in safety. But when it comes to down level, say management level or say general management level, manager level, supervisor level, it gets diluted for different reasons, for the productivity or for getting the work done as early as possible, because they want to show to the management that I am contributing heavily. I mean, there's a competition, there's always when there are more number of people, there's always a competition who goes first, right? So that kind of competition is there, and this middle level management or the supervisors level, there is a compromise on safety, and that's why we always say that supervision is very, very important, even if top management is interested in safety. That is another aspect. And the third thing is that there is a no accountability for safety in the management cadre. Many corporate oversight policies say that yes, safety is everybody's responsibility, then, but then accountability is not distributed, is not defined. The performance evaluation of the managers does not include safety as one of the parameter, and there lies the one of the fault lines. I can share with you only 1 minute I will take. I was having a discussion with chairman of former ACC. I don't remember his name now. That was in 2012 as a Director General National Safety Council. And he emphasized the safety, and he said, yes, Mr. Sant, since NSC is doing very good work, why don't you take evaluation of our contractor for safety, on safety rating. You give us a rating and we'll consider that rating for giving the contract. And Holcim had a policy that time, if there is a one fatal accident anywhere in India plant, the managing director of the Holcim India would be called to make a presentation in the Holcim International Board on that accident. So that was the accountability. If this kind of accountability is there at the corporate level, definitely it will float down. Otherwise, it will not going to go down. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vinodji. Very quickly, I'll have to start wrapping it up then. Ankur, can I come last to you before opening up to a couple and people for any questions? What is your recommendation to the various stakeholders on how to make this work and why to make this work? Including civic bodies, including academics and all the others that we're talking about.
I mean, I think why to make this work, it's a sad question in a sense, right? I mean, the human lives here, and we have to respect those human lives. I think the paths are, you've laid it out quite well, Safe in India, in terms of reports. There could be more additional research, etc., that can be done. But I think that we will always end up underestimating the benefits if we look at it only at a micro level. There are huge externalities here. So I do think the picture that needs to be paid attention to is at the macro level. And without a regulatory push, we will not change our culture. I mean, we unfortunately do have a cultural issue, a social issue. Let's name it also caste. We do not, majority of the workers in the supply chain getting injured are from caste, are from groups that have been historically disadvantaged. There is a deeper issue here. And as sort of civil society actors, as researchers, we need to be able to acknowledge that. We need to be able to confront that. And yes, I think, we will need to, we can't leave it to be entirely a bottom-up approach. There will need to be sort of some top-down efforts complementing many of the things that, Shankar has spoken about, Vinod spoken about. And that's where I think civil society and researchers could play a role. Yeah.
Thank you, Ankar. I'll come back to what you said, but Vinod Sant, if Sakshi, you can, Vinodji is already here. Vinodji, if you are there, can you please come on? You made a comment or two on here in the chat about the human lives. And
thank you very much.
If you do just a quick introduction of yourself and then make your comment, will be great.
Well, Sandeep, thank you very much. You and the organization are doing a very good report. I've just seen it, and the panels, I compliment both the current panel and the earlier two workmen who shared their stories. It is my 50th year of work, and I worked in some other companies you all mentioned. Very quickly, I have just 2-3 comments to make. The first and foremost is, I'm not individually in favor of it, but let me give you 2 examples. Professor Serene talked about the Bhopal gas carbide tragedy, etc. Right? He made a mention on chemical units. That was the year when maybe there was a wake-up call, and there was an amendment made the subsequent year or that year end, and it was clarified that the occupier has to be a director on the board of the company. Until then, no offense meant. Any roadside person could have been made occupier, and all our government bodies used to never object about it. There was never an issue. Now, here is where we talked about culture. It's why I'm not trying to be pessimistic. The amended mention was it has to be a director on the board of the company, because the occupier definition was somebody who's in ultimate control of the affairs, etc., right? And these are the people from 48 till 87 who are being nominated as occupiers. And everybody was okay with it. Then this change came, okay? Everybody woke up, some jugglery was done. And let me tell you frankly, 90% of people who were shown as occupier because of the inspection, etc., and we have idiots doing the implementation, were non-executive directors, either an independent director or somebody who's had no connection except for maybe attending a board meeting once in a way. So whether it's a labor department, factories department, or any of the agencies, it was happening. Now the OSH code is trying to make a change that it has to be a executive director now, which is this year 2025. It is still not implemented. So I'm just giving you how we are so innovative and creative to somehow meet the law but not implement it. And all our system, whether from top to bottom, is very happily saying it's a tick box that we are complying with the law. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that we have to come heavily on anyone. I'm just giving you one actual example based on my own experience. Secondly, again, some of the companies mentioned, I don't want to name them. In one of those companies where I worked, the approach was in a fatality. How soon can we send the patient or the employee out of the premises so that death can happen in the hospital, not in the factory? So that we can avoid the jhamela, sorry to use that word, in the premises. That has been an approach. But I can name the companies in private view, but this happened. Lastly, very good examples are quoted. In most of the multinationals, if there is a fatality, the entire board loses their bonus. And in those companies, 70 to 60% of their compensation is bonus. That is what works in many of those companies. You mentioned Holcim, sir. Very right. A, the concerned manager and director have to appear before the board. And B, the entire senior management loses their bonus. And last, I will give one example. 2 months back, you must have read in the newspapers. And of course, Sandeep would know better. Tata Steel has a plant, Port Talbot. One contractor who had died some years back, the compensation declared was 1.5 million. They were fined. Tata Steel was fined. I'm not a compensation, it is a fine. So when such measures are there, I'm not saying this is the way. Please, ladies and gentlemen, don't misunderstand me. This is some of the practices that take place. Of course, training people, having the right processes, etc., is all very important. But many of these attendant issues are something we miss out in our country. And last, I'll give you a very everyday example. Mr. Venkateshwar also mentioned about the culture. You know, we have these traffic fines and challans. Nobody used to bother about it. I'm seeing in Bombay and must be happening in many other cities. The policemen don't disturb you or do anything. They just take out a photograph and upload it on you get a challan on your mobile. It happens abroad and many other countries. And increasingly, people used to avoid paying the money. So nowadays, most of the time, traffic constables approach you smilingly and just tell you, can you please pay up this money is outstanding on your vehicle. So the whole approach has led to government getting fines for people becoming conscious that they can't jump a traffic signal or create offenses. I mean, to examples, yes, there are many companies doing very good practices, whether in the auto, non-auto sector. And I think what you all are doing in terms of educating and bringing some of these issues forward is very, very good. So those are just some quick points. And thank you once again. Excellent ideas coming from all of you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinayji. Dineshji, I'll come to you. You have been managing ACMA's consulting arm for a long time, and you go into hundreds of these factories, right? What is your call to the brands, to the suppliers, tier one, tier two, tier threes, based on your experience that what we are talking about is good for them? How do you connect them? What do you do?
Yeah. Sandeep ji, thank you very much for calling me here and We are connected, I think, last 2, 3 years, and we understand. And first of all, the previous report also I saw, and this report also I have seen. And I had a meeting with Siddharth also and Saroj also last month, and we also met that. I have 2, 3 major points here. One is that IT is zero defect quality, and I fully agree with all the panelists. And see, the root cause is to be eliminated, and I have 2, 3 points for that. One is that if the prices are making the accidents, I think your one of the team members came to one of the plant and I removed the press pedal. And whenever ACMA is engaged, see, ACMA supports its members in through our cluster programs from last 25 years, and I can give a data also that there are no such accidents happening where my program has been implemented. Based on our discussion, we started safety awareness program every month, and last 24 months we are doing. Recently, we have also discussed that tier 1 are fairly doing good job, but there are some accidents. We'll look into that. Tier 2 and 3, I think it is a cultural issue, and I can bet you anybody, safety, we should not discuss about investment and cost. It is just not a good point to discuss and debate at any small, tiny company. If they cannot afford the safety, they should not do the job. I am very strict on to this. This is my personal view, not as a ACMA views. But next year I am retiring, and let me tell you, I'll be working on safety very heavily for 15 days. This is my personal commitment. This safety will not start from the industry. Our culture is doesn't have the DNA of the maintenance word. Like I walk in every day in Pune city or any city, I don't find a single footpath where I can walk very good. I don't find any electrical cable which is routed properly. Telephone bill wires, I don't know how telephone runs actually. If I open the cabinet, and now I have an appeal to all the people because some people are in universities and all that. We need to dig out the basic root cause, and that basic root cause happens from a cultural issue. So I have two major suggestions. One is that our system, education system, should be made mandatory to understand what is maintenance. And I can put a very small example that every day we use our socks, the shoe socks. And I ask very jokingly, what is the life of the socks? And let me tell you, a Karodapati person will also say that when there is a big hole, then I will change the socks. We don't have any standard for this, so we have to create the standards. And I think the time has come to rewrite all the things. I don't want to blame anybody in the system, but I think the pride has to be built that my company is very safe and I work with that. And also, we have to still say a little bit oppose also that if the machine is not maintained properly, we should be vegetated and we should be informing. And I have very sympathy for all the people, and I really appeal all the people who are listening to this that the time has come that we do the maintenance in time, we avoid such bad practices. Safety is not a cost, it is a necessity. We cannot have the second life on this on the earth. So I think we keep the rules aside and we should come forward and say that. And from ACMA side, I can tell you this is official message. ACMA is ready to support any kind of the industry in even a free of the way. I can audit and I can support the industry for the smaller companies. And I think safety can be improved in very fast way. It is not a big rocket science. It is a matter of discipline that I should not have the presses with the pedals. And Sandeep ji, I have an appeal to you, all the bodies, senior people here. Why can't we stop making the presses with pedals? Very simple. 90% problem goes. See, why we are waiting that somebody's hand should cut? And like I can quote one example, a lot of people also said that safety belts were not mandatory or ABS was not mandatory. And I can tell you very proudly, ACMA is one of the body for the two-wheelers who put many efforts to bring the ABS to the two-wheelers. And I am very happy that because of the ABS of the two-wheelers, many other accidents has many times come down. And so my sincere completing last two lines. One is that let us not utilize the presses which makes accident with the pedals. That is the part one. And last month also we had a seminar specially on the presses. And I think we had 80 companies or 50 companies attended. But I think we have to churn out through the education system. Let us include maintenance is a topic in the system, either in the primary school or secondary school, but maintenance should be a topic. And second thing is that why can't we stop supplying the defective presses which makes the accidents? And ACMA will be supporting as usual, and we are there to support. We can audit even for the tier 2 tiny companies. I can do as my CSR activities, and we have a very good checklist. And I don't want to name, but one of the OEM came us and they said that please audit all my suppliers. And we have audited many suppliers, and there are many good improvements. So we are there to support. But my only conclusion is that human life, no, there is no any compensation that can be given for a human life. Human life is a human life. There should not be any compromisation. And if somebody is still debating that, can we make a business case? And I think Siddharth and my team is working. I will make a very strong case that safety improves productivity maybe 10 times, 100 times. And one of the panelists said that we don't measure the cost of the accidents. I got a clue. We measure the cost of poor quality. I think I can bring an indicator in the market and you can help me to popularize what is the cost of accident.
That'll be great.
So it is available indirectly, but I think we can do directly. And time has come to kill the root causes. That is my appeal to all the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dineshji. I think this point that you made in the end about bringing a new quality measure, which is a reflection of poor safety or working conditions, I think that will go a long way, and helping us make a business case, as Shankar said earlier. I think that will be fantastic. So I'm going to just wind it up now, unless there are any questions, but I can't see any. So I'll just conclude with big thanks to Shankar, to Ankur, Vinodji, I can't see right now, and all the audience. Dineshji, to you, thank you for coming in last minute, and Vinodji, Vinod is back. Thank you so much for that very thought-provoking discussion. I'll not try summarizing it quickly because there is so much, but there was one point made that it needs, top down as much as bottom up. And I have to say that we have been asking the ministry and the industry to come together and create a working group together. And I think all the work that Shankar that's happening with BRSR, that could be a good contributor to that. But if we could get a working group which has the right government agencies and people and the right industry, and we started with auto sector irrespective of what's happening others, and take leadership, that could create all these changes. There is wherewithal, expertise, leadership available amongst those people, much bigger than Safer India can ever manage. So we are waiting for that leadership to happen, and we'll keep pushing for it. So thank you once again for your time, and thank you everybody else. I'll conclude this session. Saroja, if there is anything you would like to add, and we can conclude the day. Thank you again, Shankar, Ankur, Vinodji, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think this was very illuminating and a lot of new ideas I've put down. I think our to-do list keeps increasing every time we meet people. But as we said, challenge is getting the industry to give us data and find ways to collect that data. But there's just a couple of things I think which were there in the comments. One was, why do we always pick on auto? And I think that again requires the saying that we believe that if 40% of the industry is set right, the rest will happen by itself. And I think proximity was one of the reasons auto was picked up. But it does matter. I think that, the one that we feel is the most clean industry is the one that has this problem. Chemicals, construction, everybody already know that it's a bit of a mess. And this looks clean, but it has a problem. And I think that's where, Sandeep and Prabhat and all picked this. And I think it makes perfect sense. And there was one, I think Mr. Ratnani has asked about why we don't have heavy costs on companies for doing this. And I can only say that, I think we are pedaling backwards on, this whole thing of ease of business. Shankar, you're on mute.
No, I didn't say anything. I was just merely agreeing.
Okay. So I think he's saying, should there not be a stress on imposing heavy costs on industry companies to fail to comply? So I was just commenting that I think we are pedaling backwards there. We need to put together more evidence to show that it matters. And I think like Union Carbide in India, we keep referring to Rana Plaza in Bangladesh. And we just don't want other episodes like that to cause change. We should do it without having to go through those. And I think that's something that, again, we all need to get together and do that. I think there was one question from Amitesh for Rahul. Amitesh, will you just ask that?
यस मेरा क्वेश्चन राहुल से ये है कि राहुल जी, जो एक्सीडेंट्स हो रहे हैं आपके साथ, जैसे हादसा हुआ और आपके अन्य वर्करों के साथ में भी हादसे हो रहे हैं, सो एक्सीडेंट होने के पहले जो आप एम्प्लॉयर के नज़र में होते हैं और एक्सीडेंट होने के बाद में आपकी क्या अहमियत होती है, क्या थोड़ा समझा पाएंगे कि कैसे कंपनी मालिक आपको देखते हैं एक्सीडेंट होने के बाद में, एक्सीडेंट होने के
जी
पहले?
जी सर, मैं कहना चाहूँगा कि जिस प्रकार से मेरा एक्सीडेंट हो जब हुआ था, तो मैंने एम्प्लॉयज़ के लिए मेरे पता चला कि एक्सीडेंट हो चुका है, तो मेरे एम्प्लॉयज़ मेरे पास में आए थे, तो उस प्रकार से फिर उन्होंने बोला कि मतलब ज्यादा इतना भावुक मत हो, परेशान मत होना, आराम से, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, आपके पास में कोई परेशानी नहीं होगी और आपके लिए कोई भी दिक्कत नहीं होने देंगे, हम अभी आपका इलाज कराएंगे और लेके जा रहे हैं। और उस प्रकार से फिर मेरे को लेकर के भी गए थे और कुछ समय मेरे पास में रुके थे जिस समय पे मेरा इलाज चल रहा था। तो उसके दूसरे दिन के लिए मतलब मैं फिर आया और वहां से निकल के फिर मैं एम्प्लॉयज के पास में गया कि सर कैसे मतलब मेरा अब ये एक्सीडेंट हुआ है, तो इसके लिए सर, इसके लिए मशीनों के लिए क्या मतलब, मैंने बोला था आपसे कि मशीन के लिए सही कर दो सर, तो आपने मेरा मतलब कोई भी जवाब नहीं दिया और आपने मेरे से मना कर दिया था कि नई मशीन है और इसमें अभी मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता, कोई भी मेंटेनेंस का काम नहीं कर सकता मैं। तो इस प्रकार से फिर मैंने बोला कि सर अब मेरा ये नुकसान हो गया इतना, मेरे जिंदगी इससे मतलब जुड़ी हुई थी, जो जिंदगी मेरी आज एक चीज की जो भावुकता थी मेरे अंदर, वो आज मेरे लिए खत्म कर दिया आपने सर। और मैं आगे की एक तैयारी भी कर रहा था जिसकी मैं आज के बाद में कभी भी कोई भी तैयारी नहीं कर सकता। तो आपने सर सारी उम्मीदों के लिए मेरे इस तरह से मतलब तोड़ के रख दिया। अगर उस समय पे आप मेरी अगर उस समय पे सुनते तो शायद ऐसा नहीं होता। तो फिर बोले कि हाँ वो तो ठीक है, लेकिन मैं उसमें कुछ भी नहीं कर सकता कि मैं उसमें कुछ भी नहीं कर सकता कि फिर ऐसा मैं अगर करता भी तो फिर मेंटेनेंस से कोई भी प्रॉब्लम अगर होती भी या नहीं भी होती तो फिर मैं इसमें कुछ भी नहीं कर पाता। तो मैंने कहा सर आपने मेरे लिए ऐसे इस तरह से अब मतलब कह दिया कि अब मैं इसमें कुछ नहीं कर सकता। सर मेरा जो नुकसान हुआ है, मेरा एक अंग गया है शरीर का, जिससे आप मतलब आप कह के करके इस तरह से छूट जाते हो कि मैं इसमें अब कुछ नहीं कर सकता। तो बोले कि चलो कोई बात नहीं, अब जो भी है आगे के लिए देखेंगे, कोई भी प्रोसेस होगा। तो मैंने कि आगे के लिए प्रोसेस, तो मैंने कि ठीक है। तो बोले कि एसआई आप चले जाइए, एसआई में आप इलाज कराइए। तो मैंने कहा सर कंपनी में चोट लगी हुई है तो आप क्या मतलब बाहर से इलाज नहीं करा सकते? अगर वहां पे मैं जाऊंगा और काफी टाइम मेरे को लगेगा भी, तो इससे मेरे को पेन भी हो रहा है और इसमें अभी ब्लीडिंग रुक भी नहीं रही है, तो ब्लीडिंग के लिए रोकना इतनी जल्दी से वहां पे टाइम काफी लगता है ईएसआई में। तो बोले कि हाँ लगता है, लेकिन आप ईएसआई जाइए। तो फिर मेरे को एक दिन लेकर के भी गए थे ईएसआई, फिर मेरे को नंबर दिए, मैं जा कर के वहाँ पे आया और इलाज वगैरह कराने लगा। फिर उसके पश्चात में फिर मैं काफ़ी मन्नतें भी की कि सर मेरे को अब रखिए कंटिन्यू में, अगर कुछ नहीं भी करूँगा, मेरी छुट्टी भी कट रही है, तो क्या सर आगे के लिए मेरे को कोई भी सेफ्टी मिलेगी या नहीं मिलेगी, या कोई किसी ऑफिस में सेफ्टी मिलेगी? तो बोले हाँ इसके लिए हम खुद देख रहे हैं, इसके लिए हम कर रहे हैं, लेकिन अभी तक के लिए मैं काफ़ी टाइम में अभी भी जाता रहता हूँ, ऑलरेडी कंपनी में घूमता रहता हूँ, तो मेरे लिए मतलब कहते नहीं है कि आप क्यों घूम रहे हो या फिर किस लिए आए हो। एक दो बारी मेरे से गार्ड ने बोला था, गार्ड गेट पर रहते हैं, तो उन्होंने मेरे से बोला था कि आप इस तरह से आते हो और चले जाते हो, मतलब कोई भी आपके लिए बोलता नहीं है। तो मैंने कहा बोलने के लिए क्या है, अभी भी मैं इस कंपनी में काम कर रहा हूँ और कंपनी में मेरे को चोट लगी है, तो इस तरह से मतलब आपका रोकने का मतलब तो नहीं बनता है। बोले हाँ ठीक है। तो फिर मेरे को किसी ने बोला नहीं, एक दो एम्प्लॉयज ने बोला था कि अब आपका क्या मतलब वो है कि आप केस करना चाहोगे या फिर क्या करना चाहोगे। तो मैंने इस चीज़ के लिए बिल्कुल साफ मना कर दिया था कि केस करना तो एक इंसान की बेवकूफ़ी है, जो भी होता है वो सही नहीं रहता। मैंने इसलिए उनके लिए केस के लिए मना कर दिया था। कई वर्करों ने भी मेरे को ऐसे मतलब कि केस कर दे तो पैसा वैसा मिल जाएगा, बहुत सी ऐसी चीज़ों के लिए। तो मैंने इस चीज़ के लिए साफ मना भी किया था। कुछ और कंपनी के जो एम्प्लॉयज होते हैं जैसे एचआर हो गए, और जो वर्कर्स से कुछ ऊपर भी हो जाते हैं, तो उन लोगों ने बोला था कि यार चलो कोई बात नहीं, और एचआर सर ने बोला था कि आप देखिए ऐसा काम कोई भी मत कीजिए जिससे कि कंपनी को कोई भी प्रॉब्लम हो, और आपको भी प्रॉब्लम होगी, आप ऐसा काम मत करना। मना भी किया था मेरे को किसी भी प्रकार से, मतलब उन्होंने समझाया था कि ऐसा काम ना करें, कि कंपनी के लिए भुगतान देना पड़ेगा ऐसे। तो मैंने उनके लिए मैंने कहा सर इस चीज़ के लिए मैं एग्रीमेंट दिया हूँ, मैं पहले ही उसी दिन दिया था जिस समय मेरे को चोट लगी थी, तो उससे 2 दिन के बाद में मैं एग्रीमेंट पे कर दिया था कि मैं ऐसा कोई भी काम नहीं करूँगा। चाहे गलती आपकी है, इस चीज़ के लिए मैं एग्रीमेंट पे भी लिख करके दूंगा कि गलती आपकी है, कि यदि आप अगर उस समय पे मेरी अगर थोड़ी सी भी सुन लेते तो शायद मेरे को चोट नहीं लगती। लेकिन अब मैं इस चीज़ जो भी लिख के दूंगा फिर भी मैं यही कहूँगा कि कोई भी केस मैं नहीं करूँगा। लेकिन यही है कि मेरा मानना यही है कि आगे के लिए अगर ऐसा मेंटेनेंस अच्छा मिले, अच्छी सुनवाई रहे वर्करों की, अच्छे से वर्करों के लिए समझा जाए कंपनी में, तो ऐसा हादसे नहीं होंगे कभी भी। इस प्रकार से मेरा यही कहना है कि हर व्यक्ति के लिए एक उस हिसाब से समझाया जाए, उस हिसाब से कहा जाए कि कोई भी प्रॉब्लम ना आने पाए और मेंटेनेंस हमेशा अच्छा रहे।
थैंक यू राहुल, थैंक यू।
जी थैंक यू।
So, Sandeep and all the panelists, all our officers, can we release the report, so to speak? The report's now available online, and you can all download a copy whenever you feel like. And please do go through, give us feedback, give us suggestions. And thank you very much for joining. And we could not let more people speak, which we would have liked to, but we've already overshot by half an hour. So thank you everybody for joining. And we look forward to your support and your feedback suggestions. And we hope that this, joint effort that we all are attempting at continues and, plays well for the whole country going forward. Thank you very much.
जा सकता है।